Your top stories this evening sponsored by courts, bringing value home. Fervent hunt still on for prison escapees. Police frustrate criminal enterprises while tracking escapees. The world is weary of war. President Granger calls for peace during his United Nations address. Jack Dio hints at secret overseas bank accounts held by ministers. Mr. Jack Dio should look into the mirror, says Minister Harmon. And GuySuCo requests $2 billion bailout from central government. Government provides another option by suggesting that GuySuCo sell some of its land. HGP Nightly News begins now. Good evening to our viewers here in Guyana and online. I'm Travis Chase with the Thursday, September 21 edition of the HGP Nightly News. Here's what you need to know this evening. The heavily indebted Guyana Sugar Corporation has begged the government for another bailout of $2 billion. The government will not be providing the money to GuySuCo, but will purchase land from GuySuCo that will be made available to the people of Guyana. Rodin James reports.
The Guyana Sugar Corporation is in urgent need of another financial bailout to offset some of its expenses. Minister of State Joe Harmon said Thursday that GuySuCo has approached the government for another $2 billion. This request is coming a mere 5 months after the government pumped $1 billion into the sugar industry.
The government had suggested to the Minister of Finance, the Junior Minister of Finance, that they assist GuySuCo in actually having Central Housing and Planning Authority pay for lands which had been identified. So in fact, what will happen is that these lands will now become under the Central Housing and Planning Authority and will be available to the Guyanese public.
Mr. Harmon said by the end of the year, GuySuCo would require more funds, but this is an emergency intervention to help out the situation at the sugar company.
The sale of lands, as you know, was always a part of the diversification process of GuySuCo. The lands, I cannot give you specifically where they will be and things like that. Those are matters which are within the discussions of GuySuCo and Central Housing and Planning Authority. But what I can say to you is that the $2 billion will be made available.
Mr. Harmon was asked about the length of time the transaction is expected to take.
To be completed today.
Since assuming the reins of government in 2015, the administration has pumped $32 billion into the sugar industry. Royden James, HGP Nightly News.
Thank you, Royden. Thousands of Guyanese nationals have been affected in hurricane-hit Caribbean countries, and only one report of a fatality has been recorded thus far since the spate of hurricanes began, says Minister of Citizenship Winston Felix. This story from Kristen Macklingam.
As plans are being finalized to have those Guyanese nationals who suffered major losses in CARICOM countries evacuated and returned home, there are some challenges which must first be overcome before this can happen, says Minister of Citizenship Winston Felix.
Once some persons knew that names were being taken, they put a name here, they put a name there, all over. So we had a lot of duplication and other issues crept in, and we have left that list behind to be sanitized so that we will have a true reflection of those who really need to be evacuated.
Minister Felix explained that with regards to children being relocated or brought back to these shores, there are immigration procedures that must be followed by families living in the hurricane-hit islands, since there are certain requirements for children that must be met.
So once they get that clear, then the other issues for us will then creep in. They will have to move to Antigua for further movement or transportation to Guyana whenever that is settled.
According to the Minister of Citizenship, it is unclear at this point as to when the first batch of Guyanese nationals will be returning, but it is expected to be quite soon.
And when we look at the list and the requirements associated with it, we will then make decisions, because at the end of the day, what we want to do is to ensure that there is a smooth an orderly movement of anyone, child or adult, back to Guyana.
Reporting for HGP Nightly News, I am Kristen Macklingam.
This is the HGP Nightly News. In his address to the United Nations General Assembly, President David Granger called for peace to prevail among states. Rodin James has the details.
Amid the exchange of serious threats on the international scene and the growing possibility of war between states, United States President Donald Trump on Tuesday signaled his country's position regarding tensions with North Korea.
The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime. The United States is ready, willing, and able.
One day after President Trump's address, Guyana's head of state, President David Granger, addressed the assembly calling for world peace, noting that striving for peace has been the principal purpose and preoccupation of the UN through its existence.
The world is weary of war. Striving for peace must be humanity's ceaseless quest. The United Nations is the paramount global instrument of peace. It has a vital role to play in ensuring respect for international law through the International Court of Justice and the Security Council. Striving for peace must aim at resolving long-standing interstate conflicts.
Mr. Granger told the Assembly that Guyana fully supports the call for the reform of the Security Council of the United Nations to give even greater voice to developing states. The President also called for a resolution of the Israeli-Palestine conflict.
We reiterate our support for a two-state solution to the Palestine-Israeli conflict. We affirm the right of the Palestinian people to a homeland and to a dignified existence.
Additionally, Mr. Granger called for the withdrawal of the economic embargo against the Caribbean island of Cuba. He said the embargo frustrates the state's right to development. Royden James, HGP Nightly News.
On the police blotter, the police in 3 divisions have intensified the search for the remaining 3 escapees. And while tip-offs have failed to provide the police with the desired leverage, they have been able to frustrate a few criminal enterprises during their operations to recapture the escapees. Here's Jevon Vickery with this story.
Since the death of prison escapee Yuri Varswick, the search for the remaining 3 others on the run has intensified with more reported sightings on the east bank of Demerara, the east coast, Linden, and also in Berbice. Commander of A Division Marlon Chapman says the police have responded to all reports of escapee sightings and that each tip-off draws the police closer to their targets.
Do you know exactly who you're looking for on the east bank? Do you have an idea, or you just do a general search for any one of them?
As far as I know, we're looking for the remaining escapees. We know we're looking for. And again, I'm saying we have the support of the public, but we know we're looking for.
The then commander of B Division, Paul Williams, now acting in the capacity of crime chief, had explained to this newscast that the situation in the Berbice district is a little different from the other divisions, but the search is feverishly ongoing.
We continue with our searches at the prison, and also throughout the division we have regular roadblocks. Also, we're doing some searches at those abandoned houses in the backlands. Also, we're looking at these drop blocks and so on. So whatever information that we have, we're working on them. But I think the most important thing is for us to continue our roadblock exercises and so on.
Meanwhile, Commander of C Division Calvin Brutus recently reported another escapee sighting on the East Coast, which produced negative results, but the police stumbled upon the unexpected.
Last week we had nothing. At Hope, we did some searches there. Of course, it brings the police presence into an area where we may not have been so dominant. And then this morning, we got a call of a sighting, and we ran into the area to check it out. We did not find a target there, but we found narcotics, reasonable quantity trafficking. So that is a spill-off benefit. So even though we don't find the escapee, at least we find there is something else that could help ease that community, because narcotics destroy our society.
Those still on the run are Mark Royden Williams, Cabena Stevens, and Paul Garayal. Officer in charge of operations, Assistant Commissioner Clifton Hicken, had said that port authorities in neighboring countries have been informed about the likelihood of the escapees fleeing the jurisdiction. Javon Vickery, HGP Nightly News.
An interesting story now. Minister of State Joseph Harmon has responded to a hint by opposition leader Bar Jagdeo, who suggested that some government ministers might have secret bank accounts overseas. More from Rodin James.
When opposition leader Bar Jagdeo addressed his party's press briefing Tuesday, he hinted at two countries, the Dominican Republic and the Cayman Islands, saying that if the government is serious about going after secret bank accounts of Guyanese politicians, then those two countries should be targeted. But since this is the first time this is coming to light, I asked Mr. Jagdeo what the public might have missed.
No, you didn't miss anything. You heard me clearly about, I don't know whether it was synonymous with or with the government officials. I was mentioning it about the unwillingness of this government to hire an international firm to trace the assets of former government officials or current ones. And current ones, not or, and current ones. When we have called for it, after they make allegations all the time that we took a lot of money and stashed it abroad. And we have all these assets abroad. So why would they want to do it? Then they can easily prove this. I think they don't want us to get, you'll be surprised the findings. You'll be surprised at the findings.
Jagdeo said if or when the government decides to trace assets of local politicians, he certainly isn't scared.
We made a suggestion that they should trace the assets of former government officials as well as current ones. They're running scared about that. I'm not running scared.
Minister of State Joseph Harmon on Thursday was asked by Nightly News about the assertions made by Mr. Jagdeo.
State to you, as far as I'm aware, nobody in this current administration will be afraid of any such inquiry. So Mr. Jagdeo must look in the mirror.
Harmon said that any government official, past or present, who used their office for gains, once that is found to be so, will be dealt with the establishment of the State Assets Recovery Agency.
They will go after all of these accounts, whether they be former government, current government. And so anybody who knows they got account in these islands or these territories who might be affected by the hurricane, that is their problem.
Royden James, HGP Nightly News.
Thank you, Royden. This is a good time as any to talk about climate change and its nexus with Guyana's Green State strategy. Increasingly, Caribbean countries are being confronted with threats beyond the control of their borders, and this is a clear indication that no country is safe from the adverse effects of climate change. Christian Macklingam reports.
A number of countries in the Caribbean have been battered into devastation following the recent spate of tropical storms and hurricanes. However, Guyana remains cognizant of the impact of climate change on small developing countries and low-lying states, and what is possible in the near future. That's according to Prime Minister Moses Nagamutu.
Through the promotion of sustainable and responsible use of our national patrimonies, we can realize increased development for present and future generations while simultaneously maintaining the pristine biodiversity in our natural environment.
Prime Minister Nagamutu speaking at Chile's 207th Independence Anniversary celebrations in Georgetown. Guyana can suffer tremendously from the harsh and negative effects of climate change, and it is within this context that government has mandated the pursuit of a green state development strategy. The Prime Minister also lamented the situation that CARICOM countries are presently facing.
The recent and even ongoing tragedies resulting from Hurricane Harvey, Irma, and now Maria, which devastated and threatened to devastate the lives of our brothers and sisters in our region, are testimony to the inevitable effects of climate change.
According to Prime Minister Nagamutu, the affected countries are in the rebuilding process and the most vulnerable countries are on the alert. Guyana remains committed to helping them in whatever ways it can.
I've seen a satellite photograph of the Caribbean islands, and they look like the desert in the midst of the Sahara. The green has been replaced with brown. These phenomena require us to work assiduously to support each other to surmount these challenges.
Reporting for HGP Nightly News, I am Kristen Macklingham.
Thanks for staying tuned to HGP Nightly News. Workers of the Russian bauxite company Rusal are once again complaining about poor working conditions. Their union is pessimistic about improving relations with the company as central government pledges intervention. Rodin James has been following developments there.
The Guyana Bauxite and General Workers Union is demanding urgent intervention by central government to address a host of matters affecting Rusal workers. Back in 2009, Rusal had dismissed a number of workers who had spoken out against poor working conditions and unfair treatment, among other things. The issues currently facing these workers now are not new. They include wrongful dismissal of workers, deteriorating occupational health and safety conditions, increased pay and tax waivers on overtime. General Secretary of the GBGWU, Mr. Lincoln Lewis, expressed his union's dissatisfaction over the persistent unfair treatment meted out to the workers by Rusal.
Rusal cannot continue in this country to challenge the sovereignty of Guyana by not respecting the law. And we believe that Minister Scott and the cabinet of this country has a responsibility to make sure that they respect it.
Had it been up to Mr. Lewis, Rusal would have been out of this country long ago. He holds the view that in no other part of the world Rusal would be allowed to manage its affairs the way it's doing in Guyana.
Is that action has to be taken by the government. Either they take action by letting Rusal respect the law, or they leave.
The workers told of how defective vehicles are being used to transfer them to and from work. Last week, one of those vehicles was involved in an accident in which several of the workers were injured. Approached for a comment on Rusal's reported lax treatment of workers, Minister with responsibility for Labour Keith Scott doesn't seem to have the same position of the union. He still feels dialogue is the best way out.
Break the hand of the company or the hand of the union. What you can do is insist that the companies, whether it's local or foreign, respect and adhere to the laws of Guyana. And in areas where we find that there's any transgression, we have been relentless in bringing the companies to book, and we shall continue to do so.
A team from the Department of Labour is expected to visit Rusal soon, Minister Scott relayed. Rusal has not been fully cooperative to have the matters affecting the workers resolved. In the case of the wrongful dismissal of the 62 workers in 2009 and 2010, the company has refused to reach with the union to iron out the matter. In fact, the company had made moves to derecognize the union representing the workers. Royden James, HGP Nightly News.
Thank you, Royden. The life and works of several influential Indigenous Guyanese recently came into sharp focus as the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs hosted an evening of reflection on the contribution of Indigenous stalwarts as the late Stephen Campbell. More from Anna George.
Stephen Campbell made his mark as the first Amerindian Member of Parliament in Guyana when he was elected to the Legislative Council of British Guyana in September 1957. As the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs celebrates Indigenous Heritage Month, the life and works of Stephen Campbell were celebrated at the Indigenous village Sophia. Here is Minister of Indigenous Peoples Affairs, Sidney Allicock.
Mr. Stephen Campbell fought in all areas for the good of his people. As a matter of fact, before independence, he actually said if the coastal people were ready for independence, the hinterland was not, because they were not involved in the discussions and the debate and the planning for independence.
Minister Ali Cook says that Stephen Campbell was a leader who believed in the good life and the development of every Indigenous community.
And little do we know, I think, until now, is that for the first time, under his lobbying, we as Indigenous peoples were able to vote at elections, national elections. After 50 years, we still are not organized as he wished us to be. And I think we should take these opportunities. Every heritage and every time we have this day put aside for him to think about the values he left.
The minister predicted that Guyana's eco-environment, which is managed by several Indigenous communities, will emerge as the healthiest contribution to the economy.
In consideration, we should be thinking about revamping the Amerindian Research Unit at the University of Guyana. We need to have that creativeness that is within the Indigenous peoples to be exposed across Guyana and way beyond. To have our works being advertised, our books, our poetry, our drama, our music, our arts and crafts, our languages.
14 Indigenous citizens were awarded for offering more than 25 years of service to the Indigenous community, mainly in the education sector, community development, health, and culture. Reporting for HGP Nightly News, Ayana George.
Thank you, Ayana. There are some matters affecting the evacuation of Guyanese nationals in countries recently ravaged by Hurricane Maria, but systems are reportedly being put in place to sort out those matters. Kristen Macklingam is on this story.
As plans are being finalized to have those Guyanese nationals who suffered major losses in CARICOM countries evacuated and returned home, there are some challenges which must first be overcome before this can happen, says Minister of Citizenship Winston Felix.
Once some persons knew that names were being taken, they put the name here, they put the name there, all over. So we had a lot of duplication and other issues crept in, and we have left that list behind to be sanitized so that we will have a true reflection of those who really need to be evacuated.
Minister Felix explained that with regards to children being relocated or brought back to these shores, there are immigration procedures that must be followed by families living in the hurricane-hit islands, since there are certain requirements for children that must be met.
So once they get that clear, then the other issues for us will then creep in. They will have to move to Antigua for further movement or transportation to Guyana whenever that is settled.
According to the Minister of Citizenship, it is unclear at this point as to when the first batch of Guyanese nationals will be returning, but it is expected to be quite soon.
And when we look at the list and the requirements associated with it, we will then make decisions, because at the end of the day, what we want to do is to ensure that there is a smooth and orderly movement of anyone, child or adult, back to Guyana.
Reporting for HGP Nightly News, I am Kristen Macklingam.
Meanwhile, Hurricane Maria has regained major hurricane strength as it batters the Dominican Republic hours after it thrashed Puerto Rico and is forecasted to reach the Turks and Caicos Islands Thursday night. Here again is Kristen Macklingam.
As Hurricane Maria moves from the northern coast of the Dominican Republic, the people of Puerto Rico are reeling in the aftermath of the cyclone. Maria is currently moving northwest at 9 miles per hour with maximum sustained winds of 115 miles per hour. The Category 3 hurricane is expected to pass near or just east of the Turks and Caicos overnight before barreling towards the Bahamas through Friday. Puerto Rico's governor said that Maria had hit the island's electricity grid so badly that it could take months to restore power. The governor has asked President Donald Trump to declare the island a disaster area after the storm unleashed heavy flooding and life-threatening winds and damaged infrastructure across the territory. Meanwhile, Dominica's Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit said at least 15 people are dead and 20 others are missing in the wake of Hurricane Maria. It was a miracle that the death toll was not in the hundreds, Prime Minister Skerrit tearfully told a local television station. He said homes have been flattened, schools have been destroyed, telecommunications have been cut off, and the island's main hospital is still without electricity. Over in Mexico, latest reports indicate that more than 230 people have been killed by the earthquake. Rescuers are said to be racing against the clock to reach survivors trapped under the rubble of a school in Mexico City, which collapsed during Tuesday's earthquake. They initially reported that a 12-year-old child may be sheltering under a table, but now they say they believe it is an adult. Reporting for HGP Nightly News, I am Kristen Macklingham.
Thanks for staying tuned. I'm Stanford Howard with the HGP Sportscast. We begin with football. The Guyana Football Federation presented football equipment to President's College to augment the development of football program at the school. Javon Vickery has more on this story.
The presentation was made on Wednesday at the school to the physical education teacher Willen Cameron by the GFF's Youth Development Officer Brian Joseph. The donation comprised of 7 footballs, 16 bibs, and 20 flat markers on behalf of President's College alumni. Joseph expressed delight for the partnership with the President's College alumni, saying that the GFF was excited because the school has actually come forward and asked for support. Cameron said the school was eager for the partnership, which will assist the country's football program overall. Jafar Gibbons, member of the alumni with responsibility for sport, said the alumni is focusing on sport development in the school in a systematic way. Joseph said that the GFF is interested in building capacity for long-term football development and pointed out that there is much more that the GFF has to offer, including coaching expertise. He added that the GFF would like to see more schools coming forward and making requests to partner with the organization. The alumni, which is headed by Damian Sears, is scheduled to begin the football project on Sunday, the 24th of September, at the Golden Grove Community Center ground from 9:30. Javon Vickery, HGP Sport.
In cricket news, Essequibo maintains dominance on the points table in the 2017 Guyana Cricket Board Jaguars 3-day league. Javon Vickery has more.
With the 4th round of matches in the 2017 GCB Jaguars 3-day league approaching, Essequibo remains the top dogs on the points table with 40.8 points, followed by West Demerara with 38.4 points. Upper Quarantine now earns 3rd place with 26 points, and Georgetown remains in 4th place for the second week with 25.3 points. The 4th round assures an intriguing round of matches as players from 8 franchises continue to compete for national places in the upcoming 2017-2018 CWI Regional 4-Day PCL, which commences on the 26th of October 2017. In the 4th round of matches in the GCB Jaguars 3-day league, Lower Quarantine faces East Bank at Young Warriors, Upper Quarantine battles West Demerara at Port Morant, West Berbice takes the East Coast at Bushlot, and Georgetown goes up against Essequibo at Tushen. Matches will commence on Friday, 22nd of September 2017 and are scheduled to start at 9:30. Javon Vickery, HGP Sport.
The second one-day international between the West Indies and England was abandoned after only 2.2 overs at Trent Bridge. Having lost the toss, the home side were 21 without loss when they were forced off the field by rain. With Johnny Bairstow on 9 and Alex Hales on 10, England lead 1-0 in the 5-match series, having won the first game at Old Trafford by 7 wickets. The third ODI will be held at Bristol on Sunday. More cricket news. West Indies will now have to play qualifiers to gain a spot in the 2019 World Cup after losing their first ODI in England. Windies are ranked the 9th best ODI team in the world. Their defeat in the first ODI against England means the Windies cannot automatically qualify for the 2019 World Cup and will have to go through a qualifying tournament next year. This means Sri Lanka have secured an automatic berth at the 2019 Cricket World Cup at the expense of West Indies after the two-time champions lost to England in the opener of their one-day series on Tuesday. West Indies, who have a 78 point in the ODI team ranking, cannot now overtake Sri Lanka 86 points, ahead of the September 30th cut-off for automatic qualification, regardless of how they do in the remaining 4 games. The qualifying event will see West Indies join Afghanistan, Zimbabwe, and Ireland. The Mexican Grand Prix will go ahead as planned, despite the devastating earthquake that claimed more than 200 lives and destroyed many buildings. Reports from Mexico state that the track was not damaged by the earthquake. The Grand Prix is scheduled for the 27th to the 29th of October. That's all we have for this edition of HGP Sportscast. Back to you, Travis.
Fervent hunt still on for remaining prison escapees. Police frustrate criminal enterprises while tracking escapees. The world is weary of war. President Granger calls for peace during his United Nations address. Jagdeo hints at secret overseas bank accounts held by ministers. Mr. Jagdeo should look into the mirror, says Minister Harmon. And GuySuCo requests $2 billion bailout from central government. Government provides another option by suggesting that GuySuCo sells some of its land. Those were our major headlines. For these stories and more, please go to our website. It's www.hgptv.com. I'm Travis Chase. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.